In a world where most henchmen at least have the intelligence to keep their mouths shut when their boss is trying to run a covert campaign, Top5 just walked into a live microphone, tagged the target of that campaign on Instagram, and confessed to being present when a gun got pulled on him. And what Top5 does not realize, what the entire OVO operation apparently does not realize, is that this one single interview may have just handed YG the biggest piece of ammunition anybody on the outside of that camp has ever had. Because for weeks now the streets have been whispering about a shadow campaign, a coordinated push to tie YG to the murder of Drakeo the Ruler. And every single denial from every corner of the Drake camp has been immediately undercut by the loudest voice in that camp opening his mouth on a podcast and saying the quiet part out loud. This is not a rumor anymore. This is not speculation anymore. Top5, the man widely considered to be Drake's #1 enforcer, just confirmed on tape that he was standing beside Drakeo the Ruler the night a firearm got put in YG's direction outside of Metro Boomin's birthday party. And he said it while tagging YG on his story with the caption, "You don't want me to come back to LA. Long live Drakeo. Don't get me started." This is the type of self-inflicted damage that a rival camp could not manufacture in 100 years, and Top5 delivered it for free. Now before we peel this back all the way down to the bone, I need to lock something in with you right at the top, because the moment you look at this situation with clear eyes, the story stops being about a podcast clip and starts being about something much darker underneath. The receipts speak for themselves. Glasses Malone sat on a podcast not long ago and made the accusation that lit this entire fuse. He said, out loud, on camera, that Drake has allegedly been financing an underground campaign to pin the death of Drakeo the Ruler on YG and to push the federal apparatus in YG's direction. That accusation alone would have been dismissed as internet noise if not for what happened next, because within days YG himself broke his silence and posted 2 of the most chilling public statements a rapper of his stature has ever posted. First he wrote, "Say it ain't so." Then he wrote, "Red alert. Red alert. B-team tap in. B-team tap in." That is not the language of a man who thinks he is being lied about. That is the language of a man who believes, in his own body, that the walls are closing in. And that is the moment when Top5 walked into the room with a podcast microphone and lit a match on top of the gasoline. Let me crack this open, because the timeline here matters more than anything else. YG did not just wake up one morning and decide to sound the alarm. YG issued that red alert message directly in response to the Glasses Malone allegations. He was reacting to a claim that Drake, one of the most powerful men in the entire music industry, was funneling resources and pushing a narrative machine specifically designed to end YG's freedom. And what did the OVO camp do in response? Did they issue a denial? Did they release a statement? Did they lawyer up quietly and let the accusation die from lack of oxygen? No. Instead, Top5 went on Adam22's platform, No Jumper, and confessed to being an active participant in a night that just so happens to be the exact type of confrontation that would give the entire beef its origin story. And nobody can argue that this is the worst possible response OVO could have manufactured. Because now the accusation has a witness. Now the accusation has a cosigner. And that cosigner is wearing OVO's own colors. Let me walk you through exactly what Top5 said on that podcast, because I want you to hear the words for yourself. Top5 sat across from Adam22 and casually began telling the story of when he was in Los Angeles, a period during which he claims he was on the run, and he ran into YG at Metro Boomin's birthday party. Top5 initially framed the story as if he himself had been the one to escalate the situation. He tried to take the credit, tried to puff his own chest, tried to walk into that story as the hero of his own street film. But then Adam22 corrected him. Adam22 gently pushed back on the narrative and clarified what actually happened, and Top5 pivoted immediately, changing his story mid-sentence to admit that no, he was not the one who did it. It was actually Drakeo the Ruler who pulled the firearm on YG that night. And Top5 was standing right there. Top5 was co-signing. Top5 was, in his own words, part of the crew that had YG in their scope. That is what he said. That is what he confessed. And he did it on a podcast that anyone in the world can watch. Now watch this, because this is where the entire thing falls apart for OVO. Drakeo the Ruler has been dead for years. YG has been accused, whispered about, dragged through internet forensics, and now allegedly targeted by federal investigators over the events surrounding Drakeo's death. And here comes Top5, an active affiliate of Drake, telling you on tape that he was aligned with Drakeo, that he was running with the crew that had YG in their crosshairs, and that Drakeo was the one who committed the act. Every single one of those admissions strengthens the exact narrative that Glasses Malone laid out. It makes it look like the animosity between OVO and YG did not begin last week. It stretches back years. It stretches back to a birthday party in Los Angeles where a gun was pulled on the biggest rapper on the West Coast, and one of Drake's closest lieutenants was present for the entire episode. That is not neutral. That is direct proximity to the exact type of event that would explain why YG believes what he believes right now. And it explains why, when Glasses Malone said what he said, YG did not shrug it off. He sounded the horn instead. Let me step back for a second and paint you the full canvas, because when you strip it all down, this is not just about one podcast clip. This is about a pattern. There has been an unmistakable uptick in YG-related content flooding social platforms over the last several weeks. Accounts widely believed to be aligned with the Drake ecosystem, from Academics TV to Fearbuck to a rotating army of anonymous meme pages, have been posting non-stop YG smear content. Every angle, every rumor, every dead lead theory about YG and Drakeo has been resurfaced, amplified, and repackaged for a new audience. It has been relentless. It has been coordinated. And whether or not you believe Glasses Malone's accusation on its face, the sheer volume of content should tell you something. It should tell you that there is either a real coordinated push happening, or one of the most bizarre organic coincidences in the history of hip-hop social media. And if you have been paying attention, you already know which one is more likely. Now here is where Top5's confession becomes the accelerant that could burn the entire operation down. Because if OVO wanted this campaign to remain deniable, if Drake wanted this whispered campaign to keep its plausible cover, then the last thing on the planet they needed was for their own affiliate to publicly admit that he was on the wrong side of the exact type of altercation that would establish personal motive. Top5 handed the entire narrative to YG on a silver platter. Top5 confirmed for every neutral observer that there is a personal history between OVO's inner circle and YG. That is a documented admission by the very man who Drake keeps around specifically to handle the sharp edges of his rivalries. When Drake's cleanup man is the one dirtying the entire crime scene with his own fingerprints, the operation is no longer a covert operation. It is now a spectacle. And YG has all the receipts he could ever need. Let me pump the brakes for just a moment, though, because I have to be honest with you. There is a very real chance that everything Top5 said is complete fabrication. Top5 has a well-documented history of lying on podcasts. He has been publicly caught lying about wearing an ankle monitor. He has been publicly caught lying about being on house arrest. He has been publicly caught lying about the events surrounding his own arrest in London, where the man cannot keep a single story straight for more than 2 consecutive interviews. So when Top5 tells a story about being present when Drakeo pulled a gun on YG at Metro Boomin's birthday party, the correct instinct is to take that with a very generous helping of skepticism. And a lot of people online, immediately after this clip dropped, dismissed the story as cap, as theater, as Top5 doing what Top5 does, which is inventing street credibility for a camera that no longer has any real reason to point in his direction. But here is the twist that Top5 clearly did not think through. Whether the story is real or fabricated, the damage to OVO is identical. Because if the story is real, then YG has been telling the truth this entire time, Glasses Malone has been telling the truth this entire time, and there is a documented history of Drake's inner circle taking direct hostile action against YG. And if the story is fabricated, then Drake's #1 henchman just fabricated a story that directly incriminates his own boss in the exact type of behavior that Glasses Malone accused him of, publicly, on tape, with a tag and a caption, on the very Instagram story that Drake's henchman controls. Both possibilities lead to the same conclusion. Both possibilities strengthen YG's position. Both possibilities weaken OVO's position. And in a chess match where the goal is deniability, Top5 just knocked over his own king and handed YG the board. Now the moment you look at the platform this happened on, another layer of this story unlocks that most people are missing. Adam22 is not a neutral observer in this ecosystem. Adam22 has been publicly affiliated with Drake for years and has openly stated that he messages Drake and communicates with the Toronto camp regularly. So when Top5 sat down on Adam22's platform and told this exact story, the natural question you have to ask is whether this was accidental spillage or whether this was strategic. Was Top5 simply talking too much because Top5 talks too much? Or was Top5 sent onto that platform to deliver a message dressed up as street storytelling? Was this an off-the-cuff confession, or was this a calculated warning shot from OVO to YG, designed to say, "We were there. We know. Don't come at us"? The line on his own Instagram story, "You don't want me to come back to LA," reads a lot less like a joke and a lot more like a threat when you put it in the context of everything else. Let me hit you with something else. Because when you break down the mechanics of what makes this so damaging for OVO, you have to understand who the audience of this interview actually is. This is not a story that only reaches YG. This is a story that reaches every producer, every executive, every artist, every journalist, and every casual fan in the entire hip-hop ecosystem. Millions of people have now heard, in Top5's own voice, that Drake's inner circle had personal proximity to a hostile encounter with the biggest active rapper on the West Coast. That is information that cannot be unheard. It cannot be walked back. And when Drake's next album drops, when Drake's next video releases, every single person consuming that content is now going to be doing so with the knowledge that Top5 said what he said. That the shadow campaign is no longer plausibly deniable. When the dust clears, that is going to matter far more than any single lyric or beat. The next thing you have to understand is how devastating this is to the internal culture of OVO itself. There is a very specific reason that most powerful organizations keep their enforcement wing quiet. The enforcement wing is not supposed to speak publicly. The enforcement wing is not supposed to appear on podcasts. The enforcement wing is supposed to do the work in the shadows and let the front-facing leadership maintain the public brand. When the enforcer becomes the story, the entire operation loses its structure. Drake now has a serious problem inside his own house. Either he authorized Top5 to say what Top5 said, in which case Drake is directly responsible for the fallout, or Top5 said it without authorization, in which case Drake has an enforcer running loose without command and control. There is no third option that makes OVO look competent. Every direction leads to the same conclusion, which is that the leadership either allowed the sabotage or lost control of the man doing it. Now, stepping back from all of this, let me pull you into what I think is really happening underneath the surface. I do not think this is about a podcast clip. I do not think this is about a birthday party from years ago. I do not think this is even about Drakeo the Ruler in the way that people are framing it right now. I think this is about the biggest star in hip-hop realizing that his cultural grip is loosening. That his adversary is no longer a single rapper named Kendrick Lamar, but is now a coalition of West Coast voices who have decided to stop being polite about it. YG saying red alert, B-Team tap in. B-Team tap in is not just a personal cry for help. That is a coordinated call to action for an entire regional identity to close ranks. And when that call goes out, and when an artist of YG's caliber goes public with a threat perception that direct, the response from the accused camp cannot be another podcast confession. The response has to be a legal statement, a clean denial, and a full retreat into silence. Instead, what OVO chose to do was let Top5 open his mouth and drop a lit match into an open barrel of fuel. Let me be very clear about something before we go any further, because I do not want a single person watching this to walk away with the wrong understanding of what I am claiming. I am not stating as fact that Drake financed a campaign against YG. I am not stating as fact that anyone at OVO has done anything illegal. I am not stating as fact that the events Top5 described at Metro Boomin's birthday party actually happened the way he described them. Every single one of those claims remains, at this hour, an allegation. We will keep it alleged. But what I am telling you, without any qualification, is that Top5's own words, delivered on Adam22's podcast and on his own Instagram story, are now permanently part of the public record. And those words, whether they are true or false, whether they are strategic or accidental, have done exactly what a coordinated campaign against OVO could never have accomplished from the outside. They have made the accusation from Glasses Malone look, in the eyes of millions of people, at least plausible. And in the court of hip-hop public opinion, plausible is often all the prosecution ever needs. Now peel back one more layer with me, because there is something in the Top5 confession that I do not think anybody has actually stopped to consider. When Adam22 asked Top5 about the Metro Boomin party incident, Adam22 casually mentioned that he had been on the phone with someone else, and that this unnamed source told him a lot more details about the incident. Adam22 said this on air. Adam22 said, in effect, that there is a second source who knows even more about what happened that night than Top5 does. Now think about who that source might be. Think about who has personal knowledge of a private moment at Metro Boomin's birthday party. That single throwaway line from Adam22 opens up an entire second front in this story. Because if that source ever decides to come forward publicly, this stops being a Top5 story. This becomes a full-blown investigation with multiple witnesses, and the entire OVO defense collapses. Let me put a fine point on the character question, though, because I want to be fair. Top5 has burned so much credibility with the hip-hop audience that even his own confessions are unlikely to be believed on the face of them. He got caught lacking in London under circumstances that are still, to this day, contested. He lied about wearing an ankle monitor. He lied about the terms of his own legal restrictions. He has invented and reinvented his own street persona on multiple podcasts. For that reason alone, a large percentage of the audience that heard this Metro Boomin party story is going to dismiss it as cap. But I want you to remember what I said earlier. It does not matter whether the story is true. It only matters that Top5 said it. Because saying it, on tape, with a tag and a caption, aligns the perception of OVO with the exact accusations that Glasses Malone laid out. And when perception aligns with accusation in the court of public opinion, the truth becomes almost irrelevant. It is the alignment that does the damage. It is the alignment that gives YG's red alert legitimacy. And Top5 delivered that alignment with his own mouth. Now let me pivot to YG for a moment, because I want you to understand why his response has been so measured, so restrained, and so surgical. YG could have gone nuclear. YG could have gone on his own platforms, could have named names, could have escalated the beef into a full public war. Instead, YG has chosen a much more surgical route. He posted 2 cryptic messages. He said, "Say it ain't so." He said, "Red alert. Red alert. B-team tap in. B-team tap in." He then dropped a track earlier this year called "We Know the Truth" that directly addressed the allegations connecting him to Drakeo's death without ever naming Drake explicitly. That is not the behavior of a rapper who is panicking. That is the behavior of a rapper who is playing the long game, who is documenting his position for the historical record, who is signaling to his allies that the fight is on without giving his opponents a clean shot to counterpunch. And when you place YG's restraint next to Top5's public spillage, the contrast becomes almost cinematic. One camp is behaving like it has something to lose. The other camp is behaving like it has nothing to hide. And the audience is picking up on that contrast whether they realize it or not. Some would frame it as a coincidence, but the timing of the Top5 interview is another piece of the puzzle that deserves your attention. Top5 recorded that interview with Adam22 not long after his release from a period of legal trouble. That is a man who should be, by every conventional wisdom, keeping his head down. That is a man who should be, by every legal advisor in the industry, avoiding any and all inflammatory public statements. And yet, within a very short window of returning to public life, Top5 chose to sit down on the biggest hip-hop podcast in the world and drop a story that directly implicates a deceased rapper, drops the name of an active superstar rapper, and ties the entire narrative back to a private event at another superstar rapper's birthday party. That is not an accident. That is a decision. That is a strategy. And the question you should be asking yourself is whether that strategy was Top5's alone, or whether it was greenlit from above. Now hold on, because I want to give you the counter-argument, and I want to give it to you fairly. There is a version of this story where Top5 is simply a chronic exaggerator who talks too much, who saw an opportunity to look tough on a podcast and took it, and who has nothing to do with any larger campaign whatsoever. In that version of the story, Drake is innocent of all the Glasses Malone accusations. YG is overreacting to a fabricated podcast clip, and the entire situation is a manufactured internet moment. That version is possible. But even that version does not explain the flood of coordinated smear content across the Drake-adjacent accounts. It does not explain why YG's red alert message spread with the velocity it spread with. It does not explain why Glasses Malone, a respected veteran of the West Coast scene, went on record with an accusation this specific against a peer this powerful. Coincidence has to reach a certain limit before Occam's razor bends the other way, and this situation has bent well past that limit. Let me hit you with the numbers, because the volume of what has been happening is genuinely staggering. Since the Glasses Malone accusation went public, engagement across YG-related smear content on hip-hop meme pages has increased by orders of magnitude. Comment sections across every major hip-hop platform have been flooded with the same recycled talking points, delivered in the same rhetorical style, from accounts with wildly inconsistent posting histories. That kind of pattern does not emerge organically. That kind of pattern emerges when there is coordination, when there is capital, when there is a directive from above being executed by a distributed network below. And when you couple that with Top5 walking onto a podcast and confirming, in his own voice, that OVO has personal beef with YG, the mosaic of evidence starts to look less like a coincidence and more like a portrait. The moment you look at the historical record, though, you realize this is not the first time OVO has been accused of running this kind of operation. There have been repeated allegations over the years, from multiple rappers, from multiple industry insiders, from multiple journalists, that the Drake camp deploys a coordinated content machine to shape public perception in the middle of any active beef. This is not new. This is not novel. What is new is the level of desperation, the level of visibility, and the level of self-sabotage that this particular deployment appears to be experiencing. Because when your own enforcer is the one dropping the confessions, when your own affiliate is the one tagging the target, when your own podcast partner is the one letting it all air unedited, you are no longer running an operation. You are running a demolition. And YG is standing across the street watching the building collapse under its own weight. Let me get personal for a moment, because there is something in this story that speaks to a larger truth about how hip-hop beefs metastasize in the modern era. The old rules of beef, the rules that govern Tupac and Biggie, Jay-Z and Nas, even Drake and Meek Mill, do not apply anymore. In the old rules, the fight stayed within the music. In the new rules, the fight bleeds into federal investigations, into online smear campaigns, and into podcast confessions that permanently reshape careers. YG understands this. That is why his red alert message was structured the way it was. He was not calling out Drake for a rap battle. He was calling out Drake for a survival battle. And when Top5 walked onto Adam22's podcast and confirmed the terrain of that battle with his own words, YG's message went from being interpreted as paranoid to being interpreted as prescient. Now I want to bring in one more angle that a lot of people are sleeping on, which is the reputational damage this does to Metro Boomin in the middle of all of this. Metro Boomin's birthday party, an event that should be remembered as a celebration of one of the most influential producers of the last decade, has now been converted, permanently, into the setting of a violent confrontation story involving a deceased rapper and an active superstar rapper. That framing is not going to go away. Metro Boomin did not ask for this. Metro Boomin did not sign up for this. Metro Boomin's brand has now been pulled into a beef narrative through no fault of his own, purely because Top5 chose to name-drop the setting of the story. And when you consider that Metro Boomin has his own complicated recent history with Drake, you have to wonder whether Top5's choice to name that specific event was a coincidence, or whether it was a strategic dig at a producer who has fallen out of the OVO orbit. When you zoom out on this and look at the full picture of what has happened over the last few weeks, the arc becomes almost too clean to be accidental. Glasses Malone lit the fuse. YG amplified the fuse by sounding the red alert. The internet distribution machine ran with the story. And then Top5, of all people, decided to walk into the fire with a canister of gasoline in his hand and pour it on his own boots. Every single one of those steps was a self-owned goal by OVO. Every single one of those steps could have been prevented by silence. And every single one of those steps has now permanently reshaped how the hip-hop audience perceives the Drake camp's role in the YG situation. This is not going away. This is not going to fade into the news cycle. This is going to be referenced for years. And when the eventual book is written on this era of hip-hop, Top5's confession on Adam22's podcast is going to be quoted directly. Now let me be honest with you about my own read on the situation. I do not believe Top5's story on its face. I think Top5 is a chronic exaggerator whose relationship with the truth is loose at best and non-existent at worst. But I also believe that the story he told, whether true or fabricated, points to something real. It points to the reality that there is genuine animosity between the OVO camp and the YG camp. It points to the reality that this animosity did not begin last week. It points to the reality that Glasses Malone's accusations, whatever their factual merits, are landing on a foundation of pre-existing hostility that Top5 has now, single-handedly, publicly confirmed. And in the arithmetic of a public feud, that confirmation is worth far more than the truth or falsity of any individual anecdote. It is the confirmation that gives YG cover to keep escalating. It is the confirmation that makes every future move from OVO look either desperate or calculated. And Top5 delivered that confirmation for free. Let me talk about the coward angle, because I do not want to skip past it. Top5 in the interview tried initially to take credit for the act himself. He tried to walk into the story as the trigger man. Then, the moment Adam22 corrected him, he pivoted and put the entire act on Drakeo. That is one of the most craven moves I have ever seen a supposed street figure make on a public platform. You do not brag about somebody else's alleged actions. You do not try to steal credit for a moment that belonged, if it belonged to anyone, to a man who is no longer here to speak for himself. That is stolen valor of the highest order. And when Top5 followed that pivot with an Instagram caption reading, "You don't want me to come back to LA," the cowardice compounded. Because now he was trying to threaten a living rapper with an act he had just admitted, on tape, was committed by somebody else. That is not tough. That is a man borrowing another man's ghost to try to build his own reputation. Here is where the story gets even more layered. YG's response to the Glasses Malone accusation has not been limited to cryptic Instagram posts. Earlier this year, YG dropped the track "We Know the Truth," a direct rebuttal to the allegations that he had any hand in the death of Drakeo the Ruler. That track is going to be part of this narrative going forward because it establishes YG's public position for the historical record. It puts on wax exactly what YG believes and exactly what YG is willing to defend. Combine that with the red alert Instagram statement. Combine that with the "Say It Ain't So" post. Combine that with the response to Top5's public tag. And you have a rapper who is meticulously building a legal and reputational shield around himself, one carefully chosen public statement at a time. YG is not panicking. YG is documenting. And when the eventual accountability moment arrives, YG's paper trail is going to be immaculate. Meanwhile, on the other side, the OVO paper trail is a nightmare. Every single move Drake's camp has made in response to this has amplified the accusation rather than diffused it. There has been no clean, categorical, on-the-record denial from Drake himself. There have been no lawsuits filed against Glasses Malone for the allegedly defamatory accusation. There has been no coordinated legal push against the smear pages that are supposedly running independent of Drake's authorization. There has been no visible attempt by the OVO front office to restrain Top5's public statements. In the absence of all of those defensive measures, silence starts to look like confirmation. And when Top5 fills that silence with a public admission, the confirmation becomes explicit. Now let me get to the question that I think everyone watching this is asking themselves, which is, what happens next? Because the game is now clearly a game. It is no longer a series of isolated incidents. It is now a documented, running conflict with clearly identified participants and clearly identified evidence. YG's next move is going to be the most closely watched public statement of his career. Because if YG stays surgical, if YG keeps building his documentary shield, if YG lets OVO continue to self-sabotage, then YG walks away from this era with his brand intact and his credibility elevated. But if YG takes the bait, if YG escalates emotionally, then he plays directly into what many observers believe is the entire point of the campaign against him. The campaign, if it exists, is not designed to defeat YG artistically. The campaign is designed to provoke YG into a legally compromising position. And YG, based on the discipline he has shown so far, appears to understand that exactly. Let me put the final piece into place. When you compare this moment in hip-hop to the moments that have come before it, the pattern is unmistakable. Every era has had its dominant beef. The Tupac-Biggie era. The Jay-Z Nas era. The 50 Cent Ja Rule era. The Drake-Meek Mill era. The Drake-Pusha T era. The Drake-Kendrick Lamar era. And now we are staring at the emergence of a Drake-YG era, and this one is different. This one is not about lyrical supremacy. This one is not about ghostwriter reveals or Instagram diss tracks. This one is about the actual boundary between celebrity beef and federal investigation. This one is about whether a music industry mogul can allegedly deploy resources to influence a criminal narrative around a rival. And Top5 just, with his own hands, made that darker interpretation impossible to ignore. When all is said and done, this story does not need me to editorialize much further. The facts speak for themselves. Glasses Malone made the accusation. YG confirmed his belief in the accusation through the red alert message. Top5 confirmed the pre-existing animosity through the Metro Boomin party story. And the OVO camp confirmed its inability to control its own messaging by allowing Top5 to say what he said, on the platform he said it on, tagged the way he tagged it. That is the entire skeleton of the story. And no matter how many times OVO tries to shake it off in the coming weeks, that skeleton is not going anywhere. Top5 nailed it into place with his own testimony. So when I look at all of this, I keep arriving at the same conclusion. YG is not paranoid. YG is not overreacting. YG is not manufacturing drama for streaming numbers. YG is a rapper who has looked at the entire landscape around him, has seen the coordinated content, has heard the Glasses Malone accusation, has read Top5's Instagram tag, has heard Top5's Metro Boomin party confession, and has arrived at the only reasonable conclusion available to him under the circumstances, which is that there is a real threat and it deserves a real response. And whatever you personally believe about the specifics, the response he has chosen, the surgical, documentary, evidence-gathering response, is the correct response. It is the response of a rapper who is not going to be intimidated. It is the response of a rapper who understands that in the modern era, the tape recorder is more powerful than the pistol. And when you strip it all down, that is the real story here. Not the podcast clip. Not the birthday party. Not the Instagram tag. The real story is that the era of hip-hop where the biggest star could quietly shape narratives from the shadows is coming to an end, and it is coming to an end because the shadows are no longer big enough to hide his affiliates. Every enforcer has a podcast now. Every henchman has a comment section now. Every private grievance eventually becomes a public confession now. And when the biggest star in the industry has an enforcer as loose-lipped as Top5, no shadow campaign can survive contact with reality. YG is going to walk away from this era with his brand elevated. Drake is going to walk away with an asterisk that never leaves his name. And Top5, whether he understands it or not, is going to be remembered as the man who lit the match. So I want to open the floor to you at this point, because your voice matters here. Do you think Top5's story about Metro Boomin's birthday party is true? Do you think Drake authorized any of this? Do you think YG's red alert message was justified? Do you think Glasses Malone's accusation deserves more serious investigation? Do you think Adam22 is a neutral platform or an active participant in the OVO narrative machine? Let me know exactly where you stand in the comments. I want to hear every perspective on this, because I know a lot of you have angles I have not covered here. The comment section is yours. Push back on anything I got wrong. Add anything I missed. Because this story is not close to being finished, and the more voices we get on record right now, the clearer the eventual truth is going to look when it finally arrives. And before you close out this video, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button if you have not already. Hit that like button if this breakdown gave you something to think about. Share this with somebody who has been sleeping on the story. The more eyes we get on the situation right now, the harder it becomes for any camp to quietly reshape the narrative behind closed doors. That is the whole point of channels like this one. So if you have been rocking with the channel, if you have been showing up in the comment section, if you have been sharing videos with your friends, thank you. Genuinely, thank you. Every single one of you is the reason this channel is able to keep telling these stories without pulling punches. And to the moderators in the Discord, to the people in the live chats, to everybody who has been showing up day in and day out, you are the backbone of this operation, and I appreciate you more than I can say in a single outro. Now on the way out, I want to leave you with one final thought to sit with until the next video drops. When Top5 tagged YG on his Instagram story with the caption, "You don't want me to come back to LA," he thought he was issuing a threat. He thought he was flexing. He thought he was reasserting his position in the hip-hop food chain. What he actually did was write himself into the historical record as the affiliate who broke the omerta. The affiliate who could not keep his mouth shut. The affiliate whose loose lips handed the biggest rival in the game exactly the ammunition he needed to keep pressing. And if any of you have ever wondered what the moment looks like when a powerful empire begins to crack from the inside, you just watched it happen in real time. On a podcast. In a caption. Under a tag. Long live Drakeo, the real one, not the version being invoked as a cudgel. And to YG. Keep documenting. Keep building the shield. The evidence is gathering itself. Peace. I'll see you on the next one. We'll keep it alleged.